Okay, so we're about to be, I think we're on live right now. Let me go back here to the screen. Okay, we're live, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. We are the Awakened by Yahuwah Fellowship Assembly in Yahuwah Almighty and Yahushua Messiah. Today we are continuing our Torah portions. So let me just open this screen up to here. All right. So we're going to start Exodus 13, and just a little cheap little plug to put in here. We're going to be doing a differences in the book of Exodus study soon. So please stay tuned for all the viewers and listeners that are faithfully following the channel here. You will be seeing differences in the book of Exodus very soon. So this particular Torah portion will kind of tie into that in a way. We're going to be looking at the LXX. I think, let's see, we're going to do Septuagint. Then let me look at my compare list I can choose from here. I think I'll go with LXX, Samaritan Pentateuch, and let's see. Where do I have the other kilos down here? There we go. All right. Okay, here we go. Exodus 13, the law of the firstborn. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, okay, set apart to me every firstborn, first producing, opening every womb among the children of Yashua, both of man and beast, it is mine. Okay. So here we go. We got the memorial of the Passover is commanded. And Moshe said to the people, remember this day in which you came forth out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Okay. Pentateuch and hold on. Let's got it. Where do I have the other kilos down here? There we go. All right. Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. Exodus 13. I hate that it does that in the background every time. I got to figure a way to stop. The law of the firstborn. And Yahuwah. All right. Sorry about that, guys. I don't know why that constantly does that. With the stupid echoing. And of course, today we got to have a slow internet connection for whatever stupid reason. All right. Back to the shared screen here. Come on.
It was a joke.
All right. So here we go. The Passover is commanded. All right. And Moshe said to the people, remember this day in which you came forth out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for with a strong hand. That's a key verse to put a little asterisk next to. With a strong hand, Yahuwah brought you forth there, and leaven shall not be eaten. So, and I would really recommend, if this is a new concept to people, the person of the outstretched hand, the right hand, the strong hand of Yahuwah, who that possibly could be, I would really recommend you check out a study we've done already on the channel called Who's the Right Hand of Yahuwah. I really would recommend that. Okay, so we're going to kind of just move on here. But I really recommend those that don't know, FYI, this is a title for Yahushua pre-incarnate, just to let you know. So whenever you see strong hand, right hand, outstretched arm, that's who it's talking about. One of the many titles he has in the Tanakh, wisdom, etc. Okay. For on this day you go forth in the month of new. And yeah, grain is not actually there in the Greek, but it's kind of inferred. It's talking about month of new grain for a beeb there. Okay. So, and it shall come to pass when Yahuwah your Elohim shall have brought you into the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, Amorites, Ivites, and Jebusites, and Girgashites and Perizzites, which he swore to your fathers, to give you a land flowing with milk and honey, that you perform this service in this month. Notice how Yahuwah says in this month. He's very specific with his festivals. Just make a little note of verse 5 because I have a feeling sometimes one of those tribes is omitted from the Masoretic, so I'm just going to keep an eye on that verse 5 there. I'll look at it at another time to see if all those Canaanite tribes are mentioned in the Masoretic. Sometimes they're not. 6 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day is a feast to Yahuwah. Okay. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Nothing leavened shall be seen with you, neither shall you have leaven in all your borders. And you shall tell your son in that day, saying, therefore, Yahuwah dealt thus with me as I was going out of Egypt. Okay. And it shall be to you a sign upon your hand and a memorial before your eyes. Obviously, it's spiritual to have the word before there. Yeah, so it's before your eyes, meaning in your mind. Okay.
Brother, before you go on, when you say Egypt, Mitzrayim is on the other interpretation, but the root word for Mitzrayim is misery. So the people were in misery. That's why they call it Mitzrayim, and Egypt is another name for it. And I don't know where they got Egypt from.
Egypt, I think, is like a mistranslation.
Yes.
From what I remember, the English translators were trying to find the best transliteration, and for some reason in modern day, that land is called Egypt. I don't know how that name came about. I don't even think it was called that until probably the 16 to 1800s, if I was to guess. So that could have been some British, sailor or whoever came over there, probably gave it its name. Who knows? Half of these lands today are renamed. Like Babylon became Iraq. A lot of these lands are given new names depending on whoever conquers them, whoever comes over there, yada, yada, yada. But yeah, you're right. And actually, it's the original Hebrew word for it's Mitzrayim. Also, it was named Mitzrayim after the person Mitzrayim, which most people don't realize either. Mitzrayim was a person. From the table of genealogy in Genesis 10, I believe. It's either 10 or 11, where it gives you the table of nation, as they call it, that chapter where you got Mitzrayim and the Philistines are actually descendants of the person Mitzrayim. So just something interesting about the genealogy there of the person Mitzrayim.
Thank you.
So yeah, it is interesting. It's very interesting. What I found really interesting about this verse, though, when you look at the difference, very subtle difference, it says, upon your hand and a memorial before your eyes. So this definitely gives a more spiritual interpretation here, because before my eyes would be like I'm seeing it in my mind. It's before me. I'm putting his commandments before me. I think the Masoretes probably changed it because in rabbinical interpretations, you have, I forget what they call it, the tefillin or whatever, in some rabbinical sources where they'll start, wrapping their arms, and, they'll start putting the commandments literally on their body rather than before their eyes. So, you'll see like in the modern versions, we'll say between your eyes. So that's why they have that cube. They put that cube between their eyes, like on their forehead, rather than it's supposed to be a sign.
That is good info, because, if they're wrapping it on their, that's like, would you call that a religious act?
It's like a rabbinical.
Would that be more like?
I would call it a interpretation, in my opinion. It's like a very rabbinical interpretation of that command, and they do that a lot in Judaism. They have these oral traditions in the Talmud of how they would interpret the Torah, and how people have misunderstood the Torah because of different changes. And this is one of the changes the Masoretes did to the text here, is that they changed before your eyes to between your eyes. So if someone reads between your eyes, you're going to think, oh, right here, put a box here, put a box on my forehead, but the Septuagint says before your eyes, which would mean you're seeing something before you, which would definitely give the more spiritual application, like you're reading the scroll before your eyes, you're reading his commandments before your eyes. It's in your mind always. So I agree with the Septuagint version of that. It makes a lot more sense. So before your eyes, that the law of Yahuwah may be in your mouth, for with a strong hand Yahuwah brought you out of Egypt. I would make a notion, again, it's mentioning the strong hand of Yahuwah again a second time. So again, it's showing that this strong right hand of Yahuwah was always there in Tanakh. So that with a strong hand, Yahuwah brought you out of Egypt, or Mizraim. And my mom just mentioned that she looked it up on her phone just to make notion. Egypt is not a mistranslation. It's more or less a modern term given to it by Alexander the Great in the Hellenistic period. So
they called it Copta.
Copta?
Before that.
So that's where the Coptic church gets its name from. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so that would make sense. You got Alexander the Great, you got
my buddy came over there.
You got one of
started making trouble.
One of the horns from Alexander the Great became Ptolemy, and Ptolemy commissioned the Septuagint to be translated. So it makes sense why the Septuagint has Egypt there. That would actually make sense, since they're translating Mitzrayim into Greek, and that's the Greek name Alexander gave it. So that kind of makes a little bit of historical sense, kind of. I still would have kept it, in my opinion, as Mitzrayim, but, and preserve ye this law according to the times of the seasons, aka Moedim. The Hebrew word there would have been Moedim, okay, from year to year. All right. The firstlings of man and beast are set apart. So here we go, back to the firstborn law here. And it shall come to pass when Yahuwah your Elohim shall bring you into the land of the Canaanites, as he swore to your fathers, and shall give it to you. So this is talking about the covenant promise Yahuwah gave to Abraham, Isaac, and Yacob. Okay, and you shall set apart every opening the womb. Offspring is kind of inferred here, even though it's not in the Greek, it's kind of inferred there in context. Opening the womb, the males to Yahuwah, everyone that opens the womb out of the herds or among the cattle, as many as you shall have, you shall set apart males to Yahuwah. Now it's interesting, it's firstborn males, not females, that are given to Yahuwah. Very interesting to me. That's a little interesting notation there. Every opening the womb of the donkey you shall change for sheep, and if you will not change it, you shall redeem it. Every firstborn of man of your sons shall you redeem. So basically, it's the concept of you cannot give an unclean firstborn male animal as a sacrifice. You can't do it. You got to change it, or you're redeeming it, meaning like you don't sacrifice the donkey, basically. Okay. And if your son should ask you hereafter, saying, what is this? Then you shall say to him with a strong hand. What is this, a third time already? Yahuwah keeps mentioning his right hand here. With a strong hand, Yahuwah brought us out of Egypt, or out of Mitzrayim, out of the house of bondage. Now, something to take a note of, I noticed later on in Exodus, you're going to see that phrase, out of the house of bondage, omitted in the Masoretic. So just keep your eyes peeled for that. It's eventually going to happen. So just try to keep notice of the differences there, because right now it's the same, but it's going to eventually change from what I've noticed. Okay. And when Pharaoh hardened his heart so as to not send us away, he slew every firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beast. Therefore do I sacrifice every offspring that opens the womb, the males to Yahuwah, and every firstborn of my sons I will redeem. So obviously Yahuwah is not going to want their human children. So obviously That's a distinction there. The firstborn sons of Yahshua, they are to redeem, not sacrifice. Okay. All right, verse 16 here. And it shall be for a sign upon your hand. Again, a sign upon your hand. And immovable before your eyes. For with a strong hand, Yahuwah brought you out of Egypt. So again, to me, it's very clear this is spiritual here. This is talking about basically constantly thinking about the Torah. Constantly, it's a sign. It's a sign before you. And I understand the argument with the book of Ezekiel. I would argue that's a whole different context. That's actually talking about a physical sign. It's not talking about a spiritual sign. This has to be talking about a spiritual sign because before your eyes, there's no way you could make that a physical sign. If something's before me, it's not on me, it's before me. If that makes any logical sense. Go ahead, Brother Joshua.
Can you expound on what it means to be the firstborn? Firstborn sons are redeemed rather than given as offerings.
Yeah. The different basically redeemed means that basically they are redeemed, if I'm not mistaken, with silver. There was a certain type of, like, I don't know if we're getting to it in this chapter, but I remember in one of the books, the first 5 books of the Torah, you have Yahuwah later on talking about, okay, you need to give a ransom for his life, right? So when it's talking about redeeming, that's what it means. And spiritually speaking, in my opinion, it points to Yahushua, what he did on the stake, how he died for us. He redeemed us from the law of sin and death, right? So he purchased us not with money, but his own life. So it's kind of like life for life in a way, because he gave his life so that we can become his. We are his bride. We are his people. He bought us. And so on and so forth. So in a way, that kind of, I believe that's part of the change in the Melchizedek priesthood, is rather than silver, we are now bought with his blood instead of silver, if that makes any sense. But you'll see later on in the Torah, in the first covenant, they would have to give Yahuwah money for their own souls, for their nefesh. They would have to give. That's what I believe the redeeming concept is actually referring to. You shall redeem your firstborn sons. You cannot give them as sacrifices. You're not. Yahuwah does not delight in that. Matter of fact, Yahuwah hates that. He hates passing children to the fire. He actually mentions it tons of times in his Torah. I know a lot of the times in our understanding, we kind of spiritualize passing sons through the fire to Molech, like the whole Christmas, which is valid, that it's a spiritual understanding, but we must understand in ancient times, it was a literal thing. Like, they were killing their children. They were giving their children, physically killing their children as sacrifices to another mighty one. And that's probably one of the reasons Yahuwah detests that and hates it, and why he would never want them to do that to him. He would never want them giving their little children and killing them as sacrifices to him. So that's the distinction here. Animals are sacrifices. Firstborn male animals, clean, mind you, as I talked about before in the prior verses. It's talking about clean animals to sacrifice, the firstborn males of them that open the womb of animals to sacrifice to Yahuwah. That's the difference between true worship of the Father versus Satan worship. Satan worship, they're sacrificing everything, even their children. They're giving them to Molech. They're giving them to Baal. So as we are today, there's probably even certain things in the behind the scenes we don't see. I mean, we see a lot of spiritual aspects of that today, giving your children to Molech and Baal with the paganism and all that, but we really don't see it physically being done in front of us. It's probably done behind the scenes still up to this day. But just to explain the difference, when it's talking about redeeming, if I'm not mistaken, it's tied to the redeeming with silver, ransoming their souls and all that, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but that's from what I remember. Go ahead, Sister Marissa. I see you got a question or comment.
Can you expand a little on the donkey part of the verse? Because I'm a little confused. Is the donkey supposed to be an unclean animal? And if such, why would Yahuwah say if you don't have a donkey to use a goat?
What verse is that again?
There.
Well, you were
think-
talking about the sacrificing, and then it says if you don't have a donkey to use a goat, isn't a donkey not supposed to be considered an unclean animal? And if so,
Yeah,
why would
verse actually says change it for a goat.
11.
You're supposed to redeem the donkey and change it. If you can't change it for a clean animal, you're supposed to redeem it. So basically, like the concept, what verse is it, Mom?
It's 11.
11. So what it's talking about in context here, sis, is the concept of you either redeem the unclean animal or you have to change it. For it to be a
Right.
sacrifice, you have to change it with a clean animal, if that makes sense.
Right.
So you don't give a donkey. You're right. You don't give a donkey, but say you want to give the firstborn of your flock, right, to Yahuwah as a sacrifice, and all you have is a donkey and it gives birth to a firstborn child. You redeem the donkey. You don't give it as a sacrifice, you redeem it and you change it for a clean firstborn animal, if that makes any sense. So you're changing it, you're switching it. So that it even talks about the cattle. You would give whatever's among your cattle as a firstborn sacrifice to Yahuwah. So like the cows and all that. So no, you're right. You're not supposed to give a donkey. So if I misread that, I apologize. If I misworded that, I apologize. What I meant to say was if you have an unclean firstborn animal, you never give it as a sacrifice. You would either change it for a clean firstborn animal, or you redeem the donkey. You redeem it like you would redeem your firstborn sons of humans. So just wanted to explain and expound on that. That was a very good question, though. Very good question. So let me see here. I think we're up to verse 17 here. Okay. Israelites go out of Egypt, carry Joseph's bones with them. So this is another command that they were given by their forefather to, basically, carry his bones when he's dead, to carry his bones and bury him where their other patriarchs are. So here we go. Verse 17. And when Pharaoh sent for the people, Elohim led them not by the way of the land of the Philistines, because it was near. For Elohim said, lest at any time the people repent when they see war and return to Egypt. So Yahuwah, he's working with his people here. He realizes, okay, I'm not going to put too much on them at once. So he's like, all right, I'm not going to bring them near the Philistines. You got to understand what the Philistines were. Though. They're not humans, okay? They're these giants, okay? He's not, he's just got them out of Egypt. He's not about to bring them into Nephilites and all that and be like, oh, okay, you guys got to kill them now right away. No, Yahuwah, he works with us where we are.
That's right.
Okay, just like Thomas. Okay, he realized, okay, this is way too soon for them. They're not ready to be fighting giants. Okay, let's take them to the wilderness or something the other way, and kind of. Yahuwah realized spiritually where they were too, that they didn't have enough faith yet. They kind of were like Kapha, Peter at that point. So anyway, verse 18, Elohim led the people round by the way to the wilderness, to the Red Sea, and in the 5th generation, the children of Yahshua went up out of the land of Egypt. So very interesting, in the 5th generation. Something to keep a note of there. And Moshe took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had solemnly adjured. By the way, the British word adjured just means like to order, make an ordinance, like command, just trying to explain. That's an old British word there from Breton. He adjured the children of Yasharal, saying, Elohim will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones hence with you. Yeah, you're going to see a lot of that with the King James and Breton using hence or hereforth. You'll hear a lot of that. They came to Etham, or Atham, I guess it would be in the Paleo. And the children of Yasharal departed from Sukkot and encamped on Otham by the wilderness. So Elohim guides them by a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire. And I would say this is another title for Yahusha, in my opinion. The pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire is referring to Yahusha, pre-incarnate, in my opinion. And Elohim led them in the day by a pillar of cloud to show them the way, and the night by a pillar of fire. And the pillar of cloud failed not by day, nor the pillar of fire by night before all the people. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 13 there. We definitely have some interesting differences here. I want to just make a little mental note about the difference between before your eyes and between your eyes, because that definitely makes a difference there. Just a little mental note for me. All right. Okay, so chapter 14, Elohim instructs the Israelites in their journey. So here we go here. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the children of Yasharal, and let them turn and encamp before the villages between Magdol and the sea opposite Baal Zephon. Before them shall you encamp by the sea. Now, what's interesting here, this kind of hints that all these different mighty ones of the nations were the same mighty one or same person, because you have the Egyptians serving Baal. So I just find that interesting. So it kind of shows that all the false mighty ones of the nations were really patterned after one guy. Anyway, so I just find that interesting. And Pharaoh will say to his people, as for these children of Yashrael, they are wandering in the land, for the wilderness has shut them in. And I will harden the heart of Pharaoh, and he shall pursue after them, and I will be esteemed in Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians shall know that I am Yahuwah, and they did so. And the reason I read hosts as army, if you actually look into the Hebrew and the Greek, a more correct English term for hosts is like company, army. So just FYI. Pharaoh pursues after them, and it was reported to the king of the Egyptians or Mitzrites that the people had fled, and the heart of Pharaoh was turned, and that of his servants against the people. And they said, what is this that we have done? We have done to let the children of Yahshua all go, so that they should not serve us. So Yahuwah wants to pretty much use Pharaoh as an instrument of wrath. So he's basically hardening his heart. He's making him, go after the children of Yashrael so Yahuwah can kill the Egyptians, basically is what's going on. So Pharaoh yoked his chariots and led off all his people with himself, having also taken 600 chosen chariots and all the cavalry of the Egyptians and rulers overall. And Yahuwah hardened, here we go, verse 8, he hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and his servants. He pursued after the children of Yashrael, and the children of Yashrael went forth with a high hand. So to understand this concept of why he's doing this, you have to read the whole book of Exodus. Okay, Yahuwah says way back, I think chapter 7 or chapter 8, he says, listen, this is the purpose of Pharaoh, is for my esteem to be showed by basically destroying him. The whole earth is fearing Yahuwah's name, his reputation, his character, his proper name even. By the destruction of this Pharaoh, the people are now going to fear the Israelites afterwards, and even fear Yahuwah above the Israelites. They're going to see, wow, this guy's really the Almighty. He just, by himself, this deity just destroyed, a whole nation of people. And even this Pharaoh, which, by the way, historically, you got to understand, kings thought themselves to be deities themselves. This is what is commonly called in the English language apotheosis. So pharaohs, and you can, if you don't believe me, research this for yourself. Every pharaoh believed to be the reincarnation of Osiris. This is like a fact, a historical fact. So by Yahuwah doing this to that pharaoh and making him an instrument, a vessel of wrath, all these nations were afraid of Yahuwah and his people. After this, you'll see once we get to the book of Judges, not Judges, I mean the book of Numbers, you see, what is that guy's name? That makes them, that tries to curse Yashrael but can't. Balaam.
Oh, right.
Balaam and his people are afraid of them. Or he talks to Balak, and Balak, I forget who exactly wants to curse them, but Balaam's like, I'm not going to be cursing who has Baruch. No, I'm not messing with them. No. And he's like, do you know what they did to the Egyptians? Like, the fame of Yahuwah starts getting spread out all over the earth. They're like, no, we're not messing with the Hebrews. No. So you'll see there's a purpose behind this, why Yahuwah's hardening Pharaoh's heart.
Right.
In my opinion, he's making this Pharaoh like a Judas or a type of the beast, where this guy's just destined to be destroyed. That's his only purpose. That's why Yahuwah is not allowing him to repent. He's like, all right, well, your purpose is to be destroyed. You're a vessel of wrath. Go ahead, Sister Sadia, real quick. Go ahead.
Okay. Now, how I see it is exactly, he says, nothing new under the sun. So as we are going through what the Israel went through before, we are seeing it by this law that passed it. You can kill a baby up to 30 days after birth. That is a cry from our hearts. Abba, destroy them. Actually, bring them to naught. Father, let them see their evil hearts. And not only that, they're destroying all our food processing. There's this guy I saw today earlier, 12 and 22 of our big distributors of food, they've been destroying them. The 3 planes crashed into some of them. So we're seeing the destruction, plus all the fires and all the others, like ingredients that they need for preservatives, all that kind of stuff. Everything is going. But we will cry out, and we don't got to worry. Like Brother said last night, he will give us manna. But we are seeing the evil take place today, but we don't have to take it to our hearts and be all, no, we are seeing it. Nothing new under the sun. Abba's gonna get a hold of Biden and his ugly, people, and Abba's he's gonna deal with these people. And I think that we are living this time as they lived in Mitzrayim, the people, and Abba's hardening the hearts of this woman that she gave her vote that passed that abortion law is horrific, So I think that we're starting to see what our brothers and sisters went through, and we're seeing it faster because we have the internet. And the internet, what the enemy meant for harm, Yahuwah turns it around to show us. Our Father shows us that he will use anything he so desires to wake us up, to make us really realize what this world is all about.
Yeah. Hallelujah. Yep. Agree 100%. So let's see here. We got verse 9 here of chapter 14. So, and the Egyptians pursued after them, found them encamped by the sea, and all the chariots and cavalry of Pharaoh, and the horsemen and his army before the village over against Baal-Zephon. After I finish this chapter, I'm going to go into some other versions of the Torah that kind of expound about this place of Baal-Zephon and what exactly the Egyptians were trying to do over there. It's kind of interesting. But yeah, there's definitely a worship aspect there with them going to Baal-Zephon that's kind of hinted at here. Which I kind of find it interesting because Baal is supposed to be a Canaanite deity, not a Egyptian deity, but kind of interesting. The Israelites murmur, and Pharaoh approached, and the children of Yashua having looked up, beheld, and the Egyptians encamped behind them, and they were very greatly terrified. And the children of Yashua cried to Yahuwah. Okay. And said to Masha, and Yahuwah said to Masha, oh no, my bad. They're saying to Masha here. Okay, so and said to Masha, because there were no graves in the land of Egypt, Have you brought us forth to slay us in the wilderness? What is this you have done to us, having brought us out of Egypt or Mitzrayim? Okay. All right. Is not this the word which we spoke to you in Egypt, saying, let us alone that we may serve the Egyptians, for it is better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in this wilderness. Okay, Moshe comforts them. And Moshe said to the people, be of two courage, stand and see the salvation, the Yasha, as we would say in the Hebrew, the Yasha, which is from Yahuwah, which he will work for us this day. For as you have seen the Egyptians today, you shall see them again no more forever. What I find interesting too is that our Savior's name, Yahusha, literally the suffix of his name comes from Yasha. So literally the name Yahusha is a compound word that means Yahuwah is salvation. So I find it interesting. Yahusha is being mentioned here again in verse 13 of Exodus 14. Yahuwah shall fight for you, you shall hold your peace. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, why do you cry thou to me? Yeah, again with the British here. Why do you cry to me? Speak to the children of Yahshua and let them proceed. And do you lift up your rod and stretch forth your hand over the sea and divide it, and let the children of Yahshua enter into the midst of the sea on the dry land? Okay, verse 17. And lo, I will harden the heart of Pharaoh and of all the Egyptians, and they shall go in after them. And I will be esteemed upon Pharaoh and on all his army and his chariots and his horses. And all the Egyptians shall know that I am Yahuwah when I am esteemed upon Pharaoh and upon his chariots and his horses. Okay, the cloud removes behind the camp. Okay, here we go. And here's Yahusha again, another title for Yahusha. I'm going to make a little note of here. The messenger of Yahuwah. Okay, Exodus 14, verse 19. Okay, the cloud removes behind the camp, and the messenger of Yahuwah that went before the camp of the children of Yashrael removed and went behind, and the pillar of cloud also removed from before them and stood behind them. Notice how the cloud moves when the messenger of Yahuwah moved. Yeah. I don't think that's a coincidence there.
No.
So that to me is pretty interesting. Go ahead, Brother Joshua. I see you got your hand up.
Something interesting to note, and definitely possibly something to look into, like as far as when certain words came into the Hebrew. In this particular instance, because I've seen like 3 different words used for salvation, actually 4 different words. Aside from Yasha, you have Yasha. I found Teshua last night, which is Yasha mixed with Shua, and then also Yeshua as not a name, but as something that has been saved. And then Hosea, or Hosha, meaning salvation as well, which was, Hosha was who Joshua was before Moshe renamed him. This particular instance in Exodus 14 is not Yasha, it's Yeshua. So I don't know if that was like, aside from them using it as a name, just as a word meaning salvation. I'm wondering when that came into the Hebrew, whether that came in or whether Yasha was first. But even aside from that, you have Teshua, and then you also have Husha.
Yeah, I never heard of the Teshua one. That's a new one to me. The Yeshua, I'm pretty sure was not in the Paleo. I'm pretty, even as a word, I seriously doubt it. I've always been of the opinion, and I never realized it, that it was a different word from Yasha. I always thought that I was always under the assumption it was the same word, but just a different pronunciation. But I stand corrected on that. That's very weird. That's very weird indeed. Usually, where even translators put Yeshua is usually where they're like, I don't know, maybe the Strong's is in error because the Strong's kind of keys it to the same word as Yasha. I don't know. It's weird like that.
Yeah, the letters that they have here are Yod, Shin, Ua, Ayin, Wa, or Ah. I mean, hey, I'm sorry. So
yeah, I do know in the Talmud it's used as an acronym. So in the Talmud, it definitely doesn't point to it being a legitimate word. It's more or less an acronym. So I don't know that. I definitely think Yeshua we should look into to see how long that's been in the Hebrew language. I don't know. I have a funny feeling it hasn't been there that long. But yeah, that's something, definitely a good point to look into. There shouldn't be that many different words for salvation or deliverance. That's a little weird. It's definitely something to look into. Okay, let me see here. I think we're at verse 20. And it went between the camp of the Mitzrites or Egyptians and the camp of Yasharal, and stood, and there was blackness, darkness, and the night passed, and they came not near to one another during the whole night. I just caught a little interesting, I wouldn't say coincidence, but an interesting connection there, that the messenger of Yahuwah is going through, and now you're having blackness and darkness. It kind of reminds me of the Ruach when creation first happened, and it said, there was darkness over the waters of the deep. So I kind of wonder if there's I don't know, I could be reaching a little bit, but I kind of wonder if that's pointing to this messenger being Yahusha. Because you have this, I'm trying to remember exactly, and it's in Genesis 1, I think, verse 2 or something, where it talks about darkness was over the waters of the deep. The spirit of Elohim moved over the waters. That. Okay, so anyway. Let's see here. Verse 21. And Moshe stretched forth his hand over the sea, and Yahuwah carried back the sea with a strong south wind. And this is a weird difference here. This is something I got to take a note of. The Masoretic says east wind. This is a very weird difference here. And I think there's something about extra biblical literature that points to the Septuagint being right about this, if I'm not mistaken. So there's definitely, it's important to take a note of this. The Masoretic saying east wind, the Septuagint is south wind. All the night, and made the sea dry, and the water was divided. And the children of Yashrael went into the midst of the sea on dry land, and the water of it was a wall on the right hand and a wall on the left. Okay. And the Egyptians pursued them and went in after them, and every horse of Pharaoh and his chariots and his horsemen into the midst of the sea. And it came to pass in the morning watch that Yahuwah looked forth on the camp of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and cloud, and troubled the camp of the Egyptians, and bound the axle trees. It's a weird English phrasing they got here. Axle trees of their chariots. I'm assuming it means the wheels, right? Axle trees. And caused them to go with difficulty. And the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Yashrael, for Yahuwah fights for them against the Egyptians. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, stretch forth your hand over the sea, and let the water be turned back to its place, and let it cover the Mitzrites, both upon the chariots and the riders. And Moshe stretched forth his hand over the sea, and water returned to its place toward day, and the Egyptians fled from the water. And Yahuwah shook off the Egyptians in the midst of the sea, and the water returned and covered the chariots and the riders and all the forces of Pharaoh who entered after them into the sea, and there was not left of them even one. But the children of Yashrael went along dry land in the midst of the sea, and the water was to them a wall on the right hand and a wall on the left. So Yahuwah delivered Yashrael in that day from the hand of the Egyptians. And Yashrael saw the Egyptians dead by the shore of the sea. And I always joke around with my mom. This is something the Ten Commandments movie got wrong, or they used creative licensing to fib a little bit. Obviously, Pharaoh would have not survived the Red Sea crossing. So I always joke around like, if you look at verse 30 here, none of them would have been alive afterwards.
Right.
So he would have not came back to his wife and had his dead son in their arms or whatever. Came back and there's no blood on his sword. That scene I always laugh at in the Ten Commandments movie. That's very unscriptural. But anyway,
they all.
Verse 31, here we go again with Yahushua being mentioned here. And Yashrael saw the mighty hand which Yahuwah did to the Egyptians, and the people feared Yahuwah, and they believed Elohim and Moshe his servant. So very interesting. So you have the mighty hand. The Unkalos makes it very strong here, case that it's talking about Yahushua. It says, Yashrael saw the power of the great hand, which Yahuwah had made to appear in Mitzrayim. So that's very interesting. That's very interesting. Anyway, so we're about to start Exodus 15 here. This is the famous Song of Moshe. All right, so here we go. Then Moshe sang in the children of Yashrael this song to Elohim and spoke, saying, let us sing to Yahuwah, for he is very, very greatly esteemed. Horse and rider he has thrown into the sea. He was to me a helper, a protector for salvation. This is my Yahuwah, and I will esteem him, my father's Yahuwah, and I will exalt him. So it's very interesting. By the way, the Unkalos, just FYI, says, by his word that he will be mine to redeem, meaning his salvation comes from his word. This is my Elohim, or my Yahuwah, and I will build him a set-apart place, the Yahuwah of my fathers, and I will worship before him. So there's this tradition in this verse. I noticed in the Masoretic versions of that verse that they felt the need to add that in there because, they wanted to tie back the whole temple and tabernacle thing, and that it was not a new idea. So I guess they felt the need to add it in there. I haven't found any other versions of that verse that really mentions the building of a dwelling place for Yahuwah there in that verse. So that seems to be mainly a bias of the Masoretes. And some of the Targums there. Dwelling place. Just making a little mental note here. And Yahuwah brings wars. Yahuwah bringing wars to nothing. Yahuwah, his name. Okay. He has cast the chariots of Pharaoh and his army into the sea. The chosen mounted captains, they were swallowed up in the Red Sea. He covered them with the sea. They sank to the depth like a stone. Interesting. I'm trying to see, is the Samaritan Pentateuch a verse or two behind? I'm trying to see why it's talking about, or maybe it's a verse or two ahead. It's talking about his right hand in verse 5. Yeah, it's definitely a verse ahead of time. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so verse 5 in the Samaritan is verse 6 in the Septuagint. Okay, I got it. Your right hand, O Elohim, has been esteemed in strength. Your right hand, O Elohim, has broken the enemies. Even though we just read earlier in this chapter, it says that Yahuwah threw them into the sea, right? Very interesting. So technically, Masha is saying he is his right hand. So very interesting. Okay. Let's see here, going to verse 7 of Exodus 15. And in the abundance of your esteem, you have broken the adversaries to pieces. You send forth your wrath, it devours them as stubble. Very similar to the book of Malachi there. And by the breath of your anger, the water parted as under. The waters were congealed as a wall. The waves were congealed in the midst of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoils, I will satisfy my soul, or nefesh. I will destroy with my sword, and my hand shall have dominion. You sent forth your wind, the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty water, or waters, I guess. Who is like you among the mighty ones? O Yahuwah, who is like you, esteemed and set apartness, marvelous in esteems, doing wonders. I really like this verse. It's like a little facetious, like little knock against the pagan mighty ones. And I definitely like the tradition of them putting a lowercase. I kind of like that, in my opinion. O Yahuwah, who is like to you, esteemed in set apartness, marvelous in splendors, doing wonders. You stretch forth your right hand, the earth swallows them up. So again, verse 12, his right hand. Making a little note here. You have guided in your righteousness this your people whom you have redeemed. This reminds me of Isaiah 54, where it talks about any righteousness we have is of Yahuwah, not of ourselves. In your righteousness, this your people you have redeemed. By your strength, you have called them into your set apart resting place. The nations heard and were angry. Pains have seized on the dwellers among the Philistines. Interesting. Sometimes, FYI, sometimes the Septuagint gives you different terminology. I've heard that supposedly Philistines were considered Canaanites, so that's why sometimes for Canaan you'll have Philistines. That's what I've heard supposedly. So, or they're inhabitants of Canaan at that time. The princes of Edom and the chiefs of the Moabites hasted, trembling, look hold upon them. All the inhabitants of Canaan melted away. Let trembling and fear fall upon them by the greatness of your arm. Again, the greatness of your arm. Stupid people trying to contact me. Boy. Greatness of your arm. Okay, so let them become a stone till your people pass over. Oh, here's a foreshadowing right here. Oh, Yahuwah, till this day your people pass over whom you have purchased. Interesting. Okay. Bring them in and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, in your prepared dwelling place, which you, O Yahuwah, have prepared, the set apart place, O Yahuwah, which your hands have made ready. This seems to be almost like foreshadowing the kingdom, because it's very interesting that it's talking about the place that his hands have prepared. Yahuwah's hands never prepared the tabernacle. His hands never prepared the temple in Jerusalem. So just interesting. Yahuwah reigns forever and ever. For the horse of Pharaoh went in with the chariots and horsemen into the sea, and Yahuwah brought upon them the water of the sea, but the children of Yashrael walked through the dry land into the midst of the sea. And Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, having taken a timbrel in her hand, then there went forth all the women after her with timbrels and dances. And Miriam led them, saying, let us sing to Yahuwah, for he has been very greatly esteemed. The horse and the rider has he cast into the sea. So the people want water in the wilderness. So Moshe brought up the children of Yashrael from the Red Sea, or Sea of Reeds, or Sea of Suf in other versions, and brought them into the wilderness of Sur. And they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water to drink. That's very spiritually interesting. No water, 3 days in the wilderness. The waters at Marah are bitter. They murmur. Moshe prays and sweetens the waters by Elohim's direction. So, verse 23. They came to Marah and could not drink of Marah, for it was bitter. Therefore, he named the name of that place Bitterness. And the people murmured against Moshe, saying, what shall we drink? And Moshe cried to Yahuwah, and Yahuwah showed him a tree and cast it into the water, and the water was sweetened. There he established to him ordinances and right rulings, and there he proved him. Interesting. I wonder if that ties to Yahusha too, the tree and going into waters of bitterness, the fact that Yahusha was nailed to a tree and he was given gall, bitter vinegar, or bitter wine.
Yeah.
So just wondering.
Right.
And said, if you will indeed hear the voice of Yahuwah your Elohim and do things pleasing before him, and will hearken to his commandments and keep all his ordinances, no disease which I have brought upon the Egyptians will I bring upon you, for I am Yahuwah your Elohim that heals you. Okay, I think we're almost at the end here. They camp at Elim, where are 12 wells and 7 palm trees. Interesting. 12 wells, 12 tribes, 12 disciples. Interesting.
12 baskets of bread left over from when he fed the 5,000.
And then the number 7 is for the Sabbath.
Yeah.
7 weeks to you count 7 weeks to Pentecost. Very interesting.
It is interesting.
They came to Elam, and there were 12 fountains of water and 70 stems of palm trees. And they camped there by the waters. And that's it right there. All right, go ahead, Brother Joshua.
Excuse me, give me a second. So I can see that verse 15, 22 to 25, where it talks about the bitter water made sweet. I could see that pointing to Yahusha in the sense that this word, without Yahusha, if we don't accept Yahusha as our Mashiach, whether we believe in this word, or at least say that we believe in this word, or whether we don't, without Yahusha, this word is only a word that brings death, brings bitterness, definitely doesn't bring life without Yahusha. But when we have Yahusha inside of us, then this water becomes living water, sweet water.
Yep, definitely agree 100%. Definitely. Definitely. I guess the reason I got my physical connection was he was hung on a tree, Galatians and all that. So I was just thinking about the gall he drank and all that. Like I said, that could be like a really, that's kind of me like really pulling for something there. There might not be a connection. I definitely think your connection is probably a more obvious spiritual connection there. But I thought it was interesting. It talks about a tree and it made the water sweet, and how bitterness were even during the times of Passover. No, not Passover. The first day of unleavened bread, we start eating the bread in the bitterness of our sin. And, Paul talks about he's our Passover. So I just kind of wonder if there's this connection with the gall, the bitterness, and that he takes our punishment of those waters, of the bitter waters, and our punishment of that gall. And, he makes it sweet in a way, because he takes our sins, our bitterness, our gall from us. He takes the punishment we deserve. So, but I definitely see the connection you brought out, brother. So I definitely see that too. But yeah, so I think we're going to take a short intermission. I think all of us need a little bit of a break before we go to the next portion here. So we'll stay tuned, everyone. Viewers and listeners, we'll be back shortly. I would say in about 30-40 minutes we'll be back on to continue the rest of the portion. Please stay tuned, everyone, and all of our mishpaka out there. Shabbat shalom.